por Dios. Voy a ir a recoger un toquecito a mi compu porque si no subí esto.
Historic landmarks were not spared. In the central historic hall, what appeared in the Piazza's and courtyard garden, with the coffees and Marco suffered damage in a waiting in outdoor setting. Local farmers reported significant crop losses in Venezia, with a greenhouse and vineyard battered by ice. Social media exploded with the dramatic footage, hail bouncing off car, fountains of overwhelmed, and streets turned into icy rivers. Residents were left shaken yet resilient. We have weathered many storms, but this one felt apocalyptic. Authorities have urged caution by the city begin cleanup. Experts warn that such extreme weather events are becoming more frequent due to climate change, highlighting Rome's vulnerability to sudden destructive storm. The storm has left the city both in a shaken the stark reminder that even the eternal city is one of the mercy of nature fury. Rome was gripped the chaos late Tuesday. A violent storm swept across the Italian capital, bringing torrential rain, hail, and lightning strikes have plunged the parts of the city in darkness. Within an hour, the storm transformed cobblestone streets into rivers and flooded metro tunnels, leaving the residents stranded in an emergency service stretched within. The Italian Civil Protection Department confirmed over 800 emergency calls overnight. Streets surrounding Piazza, Venezia, Termini station, and Vatican were submerged under the half-meter of water. Local media reported dozens of vehicles stranded with the fallen trees, crushed parked cars, and blocked tram lines. "I felt like the sky was collapsing," said Francesca Rinaldi, the resident of Trasteville. "The thunder was constant, it shook windows, we had the struggle hitting the roof, I threw the glass would shatter." Meteorologists described the storm as a part of the Mediterranean supercell, filled the unstably warm sea and the cold wind with the cold front moving south from the Alps. When it reached 19 km per hour, and a hailstorm the size of walnuts battered rooftops and monuments. Dramatic footage circulated online showing lightning strikes near the Coliseum and illumination St. Petersburg sky and the flashing era white. The Tiber rivers were rapidly prompted warning to the residents living along the banks. Rome against infrastructure is not built in such intensify, such Professor Enzo Mariani, a climate analyst from the Super Zen University. This is another reminder that climate change is making extreme weather for more frequent is unpredictable across southern Europe.
Questo è un grosso problema, molto grosso, porta via il negozio qua.
A powerful hailstorm swept across Rome late Wednesday afternoon, turning the city into a frozen battlefield as a hailstorm, lights of a golf ball pounded streets, cars, and rooftops. The storm struck without warning, sending residents and tourists scrambling to cover with the coffee shops and under a warning. Central districts, including Trasteville, Piazza, Venezia, and Termini, were hardest hit. Flooded streets, trapped vehicles, and emergency service responded to over 500 calls to stranded motorists, fallen trees, and damaged buildings. It was like the city was under siege, said Luca Romana, a resident in Trasteville. He smashed car window and the water rose too quickly to escape. The Well de Foucault Italia Fire and Rescue Service worked throughout the night, clearing debris and rescue people from the floodwaters. Several metro stations, including Barberini, were temporarily closed. A water entire tunnels, authority confirmed minor injury to residents by hail and slippery ice pavement. Meteorologists explained the storm was caused by the collision of hot, humid Mediterranean air with a cold front from the north, powering the supercell system capable to releasing enormous energy in a short time. These storms are increasingly violent and unpredictable. Agriculture is surrounding laser suffered heavily. Vineyard, olive groves and citrus orange were devastated within minutes, leading the preliminary estimates of millions of euro in losses. In the Ostia, a coastal suburbs of Rome, wake up to 2-meter high crashed on the same road, damaged several beach establishments that had already been waked by previous storm. Climatologist Dr. Alexandra Conte and La Supercella University noted that the storm reflects one alert trend. Italy is experiencing increasingly severe weather conditions due to climate instability, she said. Warmers say the more humid air contributed. The storm that used to occur once a decade but now happen every few months. Exhausted residents took the streets and saw mud-broken glass and broken branches scattered across once bustling boulevard. Cleanup crews walked tirelessly as the city slowly returned to life, but memories of the storm lingered. Rome is strong, said a resident near the Pentagon as she washed water from the duster, but the nature reminds who was both. Rome looked at the Venice of the night, journeyed one use on it. Experts warn that such extreme weather conditions are becoming more frequent. Climate change is intensifying storm in Italy, said Professor Marco Bellini, a climatologist at the Supercell University. Farmer seas are feeding more energy in the atmosphere, and we are seeing the consequences of this with our eyes. By morning, cities workers are clearing debris and residents were assessing the damage. Glistered the fence trap in a reminder of sudden power of nature and growing instability of European climate. The instability created perfect conditions to the supercell formation, explained meteorologist Elena Corso. The hamstone size of the speed formation are extraordinary for this season. Several flights to Catania Rosa Airport were delayed due to low visibility and lighting activity, while local trains between Palermo and Messina were suspended after debris covered the track. Farmers across the central Sicily have reported severe crop damage, particularly to vineyard and citrus grove. They destroyed nearly half of the harvest, said vineyard owner Salvatore Gianto. In 13 years, I never seen hail like this. Video shared on social media showed rivers and white hail racing through the streets in Palermo, while the residents used shovels to clear pathway in the after of snowstorm. Power outages were reported in the multiple municipalities, and several coastal towns experienced shot by intense flooding. Experts warn that such extreme events are becoming increasingly common. Mediterranean regions like Sicily are highest vulnerable in the climate, experts said climatologist Dr. Paolo Leone. Severe storms have struck Italy, Emilia-Romagna region, alleged torrential rain, hail and powerful winds that caused flash flooding, power outage and widespread disruption. The violent weather in the late Monday drenched cities including Bologna, Madeira, Ravenna and Forlì, and leaving several communities underwater within an hour. Residents described scenes of chaos, and the streets turned into rivers and vehicles were swept away. The water rose so quickly that we barely had time to measure our car, said Luca Bianchi, a shop owner in central Bologna. It was like a city was drowning. Firefighters carried out more than 800 emergency inverters overnight, rescue motorists and pumped water from flooded homes. In Ravenna, authorities ordered evacuation after local rivers overflowed. Wide sections of the A14 motorway were temporarily closed due to landslides and debris. Meteorologists say the storm was triggered and the sharp drop in air pressure as warm, humid air from the Adriatic collided with a cold front descending from the northern Europe, a risk from intense thunderstorm. It was like the end of the world, said Marina Ferrara, a local spokesman near the Coliseum. Everything turned white in 5 minutes. The sound was pure terror. Photos and videos circulated on social media showed iconic landmarks like a Trevi Foundation and the Piazza Venezia buried in ice. Hell up to 15 centimeters deep fell in some areas, causing road closures and public transport delays. Several trees were uprooted, debris littered the I-19 ring road and severe traffic jams ensured. Outside the capital, neighboring farmland in laser suffered severe agriculture damage. Vineyard and olive groves were devastated, with the farmers estimated losers in the millions of euros. The crops are completely destroyed. It is heartbreaking, said Antonio Rizzi, a farmer in Velletri. Environmental experts warn that climate change is making such extreme weather events increasingly frequent. Professor Gianni Volde and Rome University pointed out the Mediterranean is warming faster than the global average. He explained it. They mean storms generate more energy, making heavy rain and large hail from likely. Rome is reeling from the storm fury as emergency response team clear roads and assess damage. When the ethnic city has been reminded it's not immune and intensify extreme weather caused by the climate change.
Guardate ragazzi! Guardate un po'! Guardate un po' ragazzi! Sono amico!
Businesses and restaurants suffered significant losers as water and ice flooding basements and outdoor terraces. The city farm landmarks from the Coliseum to Pisa Navarra, the brilliantly unrecognized shady streets of hail. Agriculture areas surrounding Rome also reported heavy damage. Farmers in Lazio said crops and grapes, olives and artichokes were devastated. Climatologists warned that such sudden and destructive storms are becoming more common across southern Europe due to climate change. The Mediterranean basin is heating faster than the global average, explained Dr. Lena Moretti of Italy National Meteorological Institute. This increases the energy available to violent thunderstorms. As cleanup operation continues, the city faces millions in damage and the stark warning about the vulnerable to extreme weather. The storm throughout less than 1 hour will likely be remembered as one of Rome's most severe hail events in the decades. Businesses and restaurants suffered significant losses as water and ice flooding basements and outdoor terraces. The city farm landmarks from the Colosseum to Pisa Navara, the brilliantly unrecognized shady streets of hail. Agriculture areas surrounding Rome also reported heavy damage. Farmers in Lazio said crops and grapes, olives and artichokes were devastated. Climatologists warned that such sudden and destructive storms are becoming more common across southern Europe due to climate change. The Mediterranean basin is heating faster than the global average, explained Dr. Lena Moretti of Italy National Meteorological Institute. This increases the energy available to violent thunderstorms. As cleanup operations continue, the city faces millions in damage and the stark warning about the vulnerable to extreme weather. The storm throughout less than 1 hour will likely be remembered as one of Rome's most severe hail events in the decades. Rome came to a sudden halt after a severe hailstorm swept through the city, flooding the streets, paralyzing traffic, and shocking residents with the scale of the event. In the matter of minutes, large hailstones covered squares and boulevards, transformed parts of the Italian capital into winter scenes in the middle of autumn. Meteorologists explained that the storm was caused by the collisions of the most Mediterranean air with the approaching cold front, which caused severe thunderstorms capable of producing hailstones up to 4 centimeters in diameter. The storm in both the city center of the surrounding suburbs damaged cars, broke windows, and blocked drainage systems. Public transport was severely disrupted. Buses were stuck in flooding underpasses, and trams stopped because the tracks were covered in ice. Passengers described it chaotic scenes. It was like driving balls. To had to stop and wait because it was impossible to see the road, said Marco, a local taxi driver. Emergency service responded to hundreds of calls. A rescue driver stuck in rising waters to help in precedent to the injured after slipping in the sidewalks, made slippery by hail. The Italian capital, more accustomed by scrolling heat wave, stumbled after exploding hailstorm hit Rome, covering the streets with ice, destroying cars and causing chaos throughout the entire city. What began to heavy rain suddenly intensified into the torrent and hailstorm, larger than the golf ball battering the city at nearly half an hour. When it means major landmarks such as the Colosseum and Spanish Steps and Villa de Corso was surrounded by the river of ice while traffic came to complete standstill. It was a winter had arrived violent incident, said Luca Romano, who abandoned her car near the Piazza Venezia. The hailstorm broke glass through the roof when going to collapse. Emergency hotline were overwhelmed and firefighters rushed to more than 500 incidents across the capital. Foreign streets crushed vehicles, safe ground windows shattered, and several subway stations were flooded. At least 40 people were treated to injuries, mainly caused by broken glass and slippery falls. Hospitals in terrestrial and Termini reported overcrowded emergency rooms. Rome was hit by a sudden and violent hailstorm, which turned in the historic streets and Italian capital into the city rivers and caused significant disruption to normal life in the city. The storm, which hit late in the evening, blanketed the city with a hailstorm the size of walnuts, breaking windows, damaged cars, and injured dozens of residents and tourists. Within minutes, cobbled streets and famous squares were covered with a white blanket, created scenes more reminiscent of winter and autumn. Severe quickly overlapping caused flash flood that swept through the central area, including Trieste and Prati. Cars were stuck in ice-city water, and buses and trams stopped while emergency service dealt with the debris. Rome Fiumicino Airport reported delays after runway were temporarily covered in hail and lightning forces ground staff and suspended operations. Train service ended from Termini station was also severely disrupted, leaving hundreds of passengers stranded overnight. Hospitals treated dozens of people and injured from the fallen branches slapping on the sky streets and broken glass. It was terrible, said Lucia Bianchi, a local resident. The hailstones were so long and sounding like bullets hitting the window. Video posted online showed streams of hail falling down the Spanish states and a fountain overflowing throughout the city. The storms also left a mark on agriculture, vineyard and olive groves around the Lazio, suffered significant damage, with the farmers reported crops losing just weeks before harvest. For us, it is a disaster, said Marco Rossi, a farmer near Frascati. Months of work were destroyed in half an hour. Meteorologists said the storm was caused a collision between most Mediterranean air and a cold front moving south, conditions increasingly associated with a climate instability. Experts warning that the Rome, like many southern Europe cities, is becoming increasingly vulnerable to sudden extreme weather events. The Sicilian city of Palermo is trying to recover after the violent storm that caused chaos throughout the region, bringing record rainfall, destructive winds and widespread flooding. In a matter of hours, almost a month of worst of rainfall caused sweat with overflow and the streets flood. Footage from the city shows cars floating like toys, buses stuck in the middle on the roads, and firing residents seek refuge in the rooftop. The water rose so quickly that we barely had time to escape, said Giovanni Russo, whose family was rescued to firefighters from their flooded apartment. At least 5 people were killed and dozens were injured. More than 200 residents were evacuated from their homes, and thousands were left without power due to damage in power lines caused by fallen trees and lightning strikes. The historic center of Palermo, known for the architecture and the live market, was ill emptied, businesses closed to tourists at the day hotels. Hospitals are overwhelmed, treating cases to hypothermia, injuries and shock. Emergency shelters have been set up in school and community halls to accommodate families who have lost their homes. The major called in a worst storm in history, and their request urged assistance to the native level. In addition to Palermo rural area, the Sicily were also affected. Vineyard, olive farms and a citrus orange which are vital to the island economy were destroyed, raising concerns about the significant loss in agriculture. Transport link was paralyzed. Palermo Airport suspended flights to several hours, and a ferry rail service was suspended due to flooding and landslides. Meteorologists said the storm was intensified by the collisions of warm Mediterranean waters with a cold front, increasingly common phenomenon linking to climate change. Italian Civil Protection Agency warning that Sicily is now one of the regions in Europe most vulnerable to extreme weather conditions. Sicily, Italy's largest island, has been hit one of the strongest storms in recent times. One of the night of June 27, several weather warnings brought more than 180 millimeters of rainfall in just 20 hours, more than the region usually received in entire month. This was hit area where Palermo, Catania, Anginda and Messina were the hardest hit. Authorities confirmed that at least 3 people died as a result of the flooding electrocutions. Among the victims was a 45-year-old man from the town of Piazza, who was trapped in this car where sudden flooding inundated in low light and presented. In Palermo, emergency service responded more than 14 calls in one night. More than 120 homes were reportedly flooded in historic districts of Corso and Bolero. In the town of Aguirre and Mount Etna, landslides to the evacuation more than 17 residents, while the rescue volunteers injured several persons. Power outage affected nearly 30,000 homes. An emergency company, Aeneas, sent dozens of repair crews on island. Rain severe between Catania and Syracuse was suspended, and yet Falcon Belen Airport. 15 flights were delayed or diverted due to heavy rain and a wind gust exceeded 19 km/h. In Venice, a city all too familiar, and the high water level flood definitions were put on the test. The iconic most barriers designed to protect the crisis from the rising test were activated sheltered the Venice from significant damage. However, other areas of the region were not so fortunate. Many towns and villages in the Venezia region saw extensive flooding, with the residents forced to higher ground. The Italian government has declared a state of emergency in several regions, mobilizing rescue workers to deploy to army to assist in evacuation force. Civil Protection Authority have urged people to affected areas to remain cautious to official warning as more rain forecast in the coming days. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni visited in the affected areas, expressing her solidarity with the victims and pledging government support to reconfuse the force. This is national emergency, and we are working closely to local authority to ensure the safety for all residents, she said. Climate experts that such extreme weather events could become more frequent due to climate change. Italy, with a varied geography, particularly vulnerable to affected changing weather patterns. The combination of heavy rainfall, poor mountain infrastructure and urban expansion into flood-prone areas has exacerbated the impact of recent storms.
A Faenza, in provincia di Ravenna. Il fiume Lamone è altissimo da record, sta provocando allagamenti. Qui siamo nella zona del borgo.
Tourists were equally astonished. Video circulated widely on social media showing iconic landmarks surrounded by palms and hail, sparking combination of northern European winter. Authority warning of potential group damage in nearly laser farmland, particularly vineyards and olive groves. Experts note that while hailstorms are not unusual in the central Italy, an intensity of the scale and episode underline a growing volatile weather patterns linking to climate change. A cleanup operations continue. Residents are left reflecting on yet another reminder of nature forcing the city form of the history but increasingly tested by modern climate extremes.
Questa è via Sant'Alessio. Guarda che roba questo. Guardate questo signore.
Hospitals reported on a sharp increase in importance of the bureaus and the minor factories. Businesses, especially cafes and open-air markets, suffered significant losses of the sudden flood destroyed supplies to outdoor sitting areas. Farmers to the outskirts and the city also serious losses, and a vineyard and olive groves were destroyed by the storm. Video quickly spread on social media showed hailstorm bouncing off incident capable of the flooding landmarks such as the Coliseum, shocking viewers around the world. Tourists caught on the storm described the experiences as apocalyptic. Climate experts warned that such extreme weather events are becoming more frequent in Italy, pointing out the former warmer seas contributed to the strong storm. As the cleanup force continues, Rome is telling the financial damage and reflection to the capital vulnerability to sudden climate shock.
Eccoci qua, è arrivata la prima pioggia. Devo spendere pure luce alla piazzetta.
Rome, Italy. A powerful and sudden hailstorm brought the Italian capital to the standstill, transforming the historic streets into frozen torrential and leaving residents in shock. Within minutes, dark clouds gathered over the eternal city, unleashed the violent downpour of ice that covered cars, monuments, and pigeons under the thick layer of white. Meteorologists describe the event of extreme collective cell, an unusual atmospheric clash between warm Mediterranean humidity and a cold Arctic front. Hailstones, some exceeded 3 centimeters in diameter, pounded rooftops and vehicles. Standing off alarm across the city, wind gusts reached nearly 100 km/h, intensified the destruction, uprooted trees and scattered debris along the Tiber River. Emergency service received over 120 calls. In 2 hours, dozens of vehicles were abandoned the submerged streets, and firefighters worked tirelessly to free people trapped in the underpasses. Several metro lines and bus roads were suspended due to flooding and power outage. It looked like a scene from the disaster movie, said resident Jill Lombardi. In a few minutes, day turned into night, and the streets became a river in the ice. In the heart of the Mediterranean, the Italian island of Sicily has long been synonymous with the sun of the tempting coastline and seductive blend of the history and culture. However, this idyllic landscape recently has been transformed into a dramatic scene of nature fury. A formidable storm marked by resounding rain and the fierce winds and lashed Sicily, unveiling the vulnerable of even the most picturesque square of the region with a firm sulfur weather. The storm onslaught was achieved with the meteorologists barely able to predict and intensify before the unleashed food and made the apeon of fury. Within hours, streets and town crosses across the Sicily were inundated, transformed urban center into unwelcoming, water-loaded mazes. The rain, increasing unforgiving, pointed the wind portrayal of the region undecided by the elements. In Palermo, the Sicilian capital, scenes and the chaos unfolded. Ascent streets and usually burst with the life and aroma of Sicily, crash while deserted save from ascensional vehicles struggling against the rising water. The iconic Trecce Massima, a testament of Sicily agriculture, dangerous stood with the silence within to unflooding calamity. A severe storm hit Sicily, Italy, caused heavy rain, strong winds and widespread flooding in several cities including Palermo and Catania. The extreme weather events, which struck without warning, turned streets into rivers, disrupted transportation and left thousands of residents without electricity and with damaged property. Local authority issued several weather warnings on the island who received rainfall significantly above the seasonal average. Videos show a dramatic scene where, posted on social media, cars submerged into water, people waist deep water in the floodwaters, and emergency service trying to reach stranded cities. Meteorologists report that the storm deployed rapidly over the Mediterranean Sea under the influence of low pressure system combined into high sea surface temperature, and a phenomenon that is becoming increasingly common due to climate change.
Madre de Dios. Su, qué desastre. Mira. Ahora mismo en Garachico.